Hello, I'm Malcolm Gallagher, and you're watching the BBT Network, coming to you from the studios of BizVision in the UK. Now, some 50 years ago this year, wow, where does time go? 50 years ago this year, when I started working for what was to become one of the world's biggest tour operators, Thomson Holidays, I was given, during my induction, a crisis management booklet. Inside was detailed, and I mean detailed, plans on handling anything from a plane crash to a hotel disaster or a political coup. I believe it was that focus on planning ahead, understanding the reputational fallout from a disaster, thinking 360, that made Thomson such a great company to work for and with. Now, sadly, too many leaders think it will never happen to them, or they think of only a limited number of crisis scenarios. My guest today knows the opposite is true. In fact, he's written a book about it, Leaders Under Fire, the CEO's Survival Guide to Navigating Corporate Crisis. From CheckMate Public Affairs, let's go say hello to Jeff Chatterton. Hello, Jeff.
Malcolm, it is wonderful to be here.
Yeah. Now, you're sitting in one of our Commonwealth countries, aren't we? Go on, tell people where you are.
I'm a proud member of the Commonwealth and a Canadian citizen, and I am in Waterloo region, which is about an hour southwest of Toronto, Ontario, Canada.
Beautiful city. I love Toronto. I've been quite a few times. It's a beautiful city, isn't it?
We like to keep it clean, and we like our hockey teams that are lousy. So it comes with both sides of the stick.
All right. Well, let's hope we can all start visiting Canada again. It's a fabulous, absolutely fabulous country. Viewers and listeners, my today's Leader Channel talk with Jeff will be in 3 parts. Now, first, I'll ask him Malcolm's silly question about what is a crisis. Then we'll move on to talking about his high-stakes springboard. And in part 3, I want to quiz him on his statement that he helps leaders fall up. But Jeff, can you briefly tell us who is Jeff Chatterton and what your book Leaders Under Fire is all about?
Jeff Chatterton is he's a smart aleck. He's a dad, but he is a guy who has seen corporate culture at its best and at its worst, and got sick and tired of a lot of the old stereotypes and a lot of the old management rules that just seem to perpetuate stale thinking. I have seen truly awful situations get transformed into fantastic opportunities, and I have seen really easy wins get transformed into horrible corporate losses that will ultimately cost the career of the people who are involved. And I sat down with my co-author, who is a CBC journalist, a robust crisis communications consultant in his own right, a gentleman by the name of Conway Fraser, to put these down and to figure out what are the common threads here. What are the things that we just assume are gospel that aren't necessarily true that we really need to address.
Yeah, I said to you off camera before we started that I love going the writing on your website because you give it to people straight, and I think that's really necessary. I mean, one of the areas I specialize and help in is people understanding TripAdvisor, and I get so many Italians doing the nut. I said, well, don't you realize the power of people have now got with social media? Now the media has changed, hasn't it?
Oh, it used to be that there were such a thing as deadlines.
Yeah.
If the reporter called up to say, hey, we're working on a story, you could say, absolutely, we want to be open and honest with you. Why don't you come by the office around noon? You'd spend the next 2 hours freaking out, having a panic attack, calling the corporate, office, briefing your CEO. You'd do the interview, you'd run around and call all your stakeholders, get everyone prepped for the 6 o'clock evening news, and then the headline would be out the next day. That's no longer the case. Today, someone has already videoed the incident in question. It's already up on YouTube. The news outlet has already put the story out on their version of the website, pushed it out on all their social media channels, which I promise you probably have better reach than yours. And if you're lucky, it doesn't say, we've reached out to the company and are awaiting their comment. They haven't spoken with us yet, because it makes it look like you're stonewalling. That's the environment we're in. Speed is everything now. And a lot of corporate cultures and a lot of corporate practices just don't recognize that fact.
Yeah, I'm sort of grinning away as I'm talking to you, because in our lunchtime news today here, our health secretary, who's been on telly consistently over the last year, talking about social distancing, masks, keep away from people, social distancing, we are not over COVID and everything like that. The Sun newspaper had captured him on CCTV in his room, snogging somebody who's not his wife.
Yeah, that's there are some universal constraints, and
it's all just part of everybody's watching. Okay, let's move, Jeff, to part one. President John F. Kennedy said, when written in Chinese, the word crisis is composed of two characters. One represents danger, and the other represents opportunity. So Malcolm's silly question, or is it, what's a crisis? Is there a measure of a crisis? And what's the bit about opportunity?
No, and having worked in Shanghai and done a lot of work with it, I asked them if this is true, and they said it's mostly true. Right. Okay. Literally translated, it's a little more complex than that, but the gist of what he was saying is absolutely correct. The Chinese word for crisis is effectively dangerous opportunity.
Right.
Now, the danger is self-evident. Your building is on fire. People are getting sick because you've pushed out candy bars that are poisoned. Your CEO is accused of sleeping with people who aren't his wife.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of issues that you can get yourself into danger with. The opportunity is really simple. For the first time in weeks, if not years, people are paying attention, and they're paying attention to you. This means that you have really this one clear, crystal moment, and you can't postpone it. You can't delay it. You can't think it over. You have to act, and you have to act now. People are paying attention to you, which means if you handle this crisis with grace, with dignity, with clarity, with empathy, you are going to do far more for your brand, for your image, for your credibility than any amount of sponsorship, any amount of paid advertising, any amount of corporate sustainability, greenwashing, happy go-go juice initiative. Yeah. When you handle the little crises well, people trust you for the big ones. And we've seen that time and time and time again. When you don't handle it well, it's career ending. It really is that simple. The company will probably survive. Your career probably will not. And there are legions of examples like that. My favorite is the guy who was in charge of the BP oil spill in North America. Tony Hayward. BP, good, British origined company. Right, although I'm told that BP no longer stands for British Petroleum. They're very clear that it stands for Beyond Petroleum. But anyway, true story. They have the big oil spill in the Louisiana Gulf. He does a horrible job of communicating. I can get into why. That's not the point. A true story. You know where they reassigned him? Siberia.
Yes.
I don't want to work in Siberia. No one wants to work in Siberia.
Right? It's cold.
Yeah. I'm Canadian. I've had enough cold. I'm good. No one wants that. And we've seen that time and time and time again. And that's what we're trying to fix. We're trying to save corporate careers.
Yeah. Do you just before we move on to part two, do you think you can actually preempt? I mean, I know you can coach and train people and you can do different scenarios, but, can you actually preempt so that people actually go in, a bit like the Thomson manual I was telling you about beforehand? You couldn't do every scenario, but basically you could see that was a flow, an efficient and professional flow.
I'll be honest with you, Malcolm. I think those really big, thick, detailed crisis communication plans were a fantastic tool in 1970.
Yeah.
I don't think they work anymore. And I think, quite frankly, a lot of consultants still charge for the binder. Right. It's easy to sell a client a binder. It's something that they can deliver. It's proof of work done. It's a false sense of security. At the end of the day, there are really only three types of crisis. There is a threat to your safety, a threat to your body. The chocolate bars are poisoned. There's a fire in the air. The stadium that I am visiting is about to collapse. There is a gunman on the streets. Whatever that issue is, there is a threat to your wallet. My credit card information has been hacked. You are corrupt and are taking my tax dollars. Whatever along those lines. But the third and the most dangerous one in terms of corporations is threat to my feelings. You are not flying the gay pride parade, or you are flying in the gay pride parade, or you're being racist, or you're being sexist, or you're doing something wrong. Everyone's referred to cancel culture and the different ways that people are reacting to all of that. Yeah. So when you understand that there are really only three types of crisis, what your audience is looking for tends to be universal. They're looking for empathy. They're looking for clarity. They're looking for action. And you can absolutely do those things without having to spend tens of thousands of dollars or pounds on a bunch of scenarios that, quite frankly, either A, aren't going to happen, or B, you're setting yourself up for failure by prepping for them only to get caught by something different that you hadn't seen coming.
Yeah. Jeff, that's a brilliant answer. And after all these years, I've never heard something as simple but as effective as just what you're talking about there. Now, before we move to part two, let me just remind everyone of your URL, your website URL for your book, which is leadersunderfire.com. Viewers, obviously, you can see it on the screen behind me, but let me just spell that out for listeners. Leaders with an S, leadersunderfire.com. Now, go there and you can get Jeff's book for free. Plus, I think it depends where you are, maybe a small amount of post and packaging. Is that correct, Jeff?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll cover the printing costs. We'll cover that. The only thing we're looking for is a few dollars to cover the cost of shipping.
Yeah. And when you go into leadersunderfire.com, do like I said before, just do a little side flick to CheckMate and just see some of Jeff's very poignant and I'm going to say blunt writing there, but it's important to get this into your mindset, what we're talking about today. Right, part two. I like your systematic approach to crisis management. Tell me about your high-stakes springboard. What is it and what does it do for leaders?
The high-stakes springboard was quite blatantly and openly a response to the biggest economic disruptor since World War II. And that is the COVID pandemic, which has affected everyone. It is absolutely a once in a lifetime disruptor, whether it's an economic disruptor, a life disruptor, a lifestyle disruptor. It has been extremely disruptive, and it has changed the track that corporations operate under. For And I'll give you an example. There is a financial institution here in North America that has focused tons of its, I call it goodwill. The corporate, hey, look at us, we're not evil henchmen of the banking industry. We actually care about people. Yeah. But it was a charity run. It was a huge, nationwide charity run. Well, those aren't happening.
No,
in the middle of they haven't happened for the last 2 years. There are thousands, if hundreds of thousands of small businesses that have been sponsoring different charitable initiatives, and maybe they don't have the money anymore. No. There's a lot of organizations which are completely changing their business plan. Maybe they relied on in-person training, in-person events, in-person things, and they can't do those anymore. Not only because they haven't been able to, but maybe the clients don't want to anymore. And they're changing. They realize they need to get rid of a lot of staff. They need to hire different staff. There's a lot of stress that's out there. And frankly, there's a lot of CEOs who are staring at their ceiling at 3 a.m. going, how on earth am I going to do this? What we do is we sit down with the CEO, the corporate leadership team, and we come up with the framework. It's a springboard. This is absolutely we're not going to lie. There's no point in being dumb about this. Absolutely, things are going down right now. They're going down for everyone. Yeah. But how do you turn that into a springboard and not a ski jump, or a downhill ramp? What are you going to do in order to capture that pivot and move on? And sometimes we spend half a day, we go over all the different options, and we put together some options and ideas, and we'll present them to them on paper. And it's just a fresh approach. It's a different way of thinking. It's a recognition of the fact that, like it or hate it, right now we are all living in crisis times. The way we used to be able to communicate isn't as effective anymore. We have to be able to cut through the noise and cut through the clutter. We're finding a lot of times the audience isn't the public or the customers, it's their own employees. Yes. What are we doing in order to capture corporate culture and to convince them that, even though you're working from home and you haven't seen your coworkers for a year, you're still very much a valued part of the team. What do we do? How can you do that? How can you make that happen? These are the sorts of questions that we're trying to tackle and address. And
I love that comment of yours about the internal bit, because some recent research shows you that 1 in 4, 25% of UK workforces are looking to move from their existing employer because of the bad way they handled that employee during the crisis.
Absolutely. And I have been saying this for a year. No one is blaming you for COVID-19. I can promise you, you're not to blame for COVID-19. You are to blame, quite bluntly. It is your fault, the way you handle COVID-19. Yeah. And that's the difference. That's where people have been really running into problems. They're not listening to their employees. They're not dealing with things in a way they could. And you know what? Layoffs are going to happen. Job reductions are going to happen. Wage rollbacks, all of these things. And thankfully, with all the vaccine rollouts, we're, I would hope, on a part of a rising tide. But businesses are different. You can't go back to the way things were in 2019. And if you do, you're going to be in some trouble. Yeah. So what are you going to do in order to
people don't want you to be? The people don't want you to be. My wife runs a Victorian tea rooms here in Northumberland, and the people who are coming in know her, trust, and everything, but they are still wanting to make certain that the social distancing is there, that they have safety, and so on. And that's going to be around for a long time, isn't it?
I work with major arenas and stadiums all over the world. And as much as people desperately want to get back and to start cheering on their football team, and I say football because I can get away with that on both sides, or whatever. When it comes to some of the softer events, the corporate events, the rallies, the gatherings, the team meetings and stuff, we have spent 2 years telling people, stay away from other people, don't get too close, wash your hands, cover your face. And now we can't just expect people to snap and get back into crowds. No. If your business depends on large amounts of people coming into one place and then leaving again, you need to have a real good think about what it is you can do to impress upon people that they are still in a safe space. There's a lot of pent up energy. I call it the sugar effect. It's like what happens when you take a 6-year-old and you give them nothing but sweets and candy.
Don't remind me. My grandchildren are coming tomorrow.
You see, and they're going to have 2 hours where they're absolutely wired up and ready to go. And I think right now we're in that sugar effect.
Yes.
International travel is going gangbusters. People are happy to go back and watch football or right now the Euro is going on, and you have large crowds depending on the culture. I would not be shocked, and hopefully that this piece survives the scrutiny of age, as we come out the other side. What happens after 8 o'clock when there is the post sugar crash, when people realize I'm that was fun, but it was a little too people-y. I'm not comfortable. Yeah. I don't want to go back into that grocery store. I don't want to go to this corporate event. I don't want to go to this thing anymore. And that's that. I still think there's a lot of that reckoning to come.
Yeah. And of course, they will be the ones that blame the venue, won't they? Well, you let me come in there and drink and be social with everybody else. It's all your fault.
We're on an extremely short leash. It doesn't matter whether you're blaming the venue. It doesn't matter whether you're blaming Jesus. It doesn't matter whether you're blaming your boss or your coworkers or anything else. People are, let me be blunt. Pardon my language. People are pissy.
Yes.
People are really angry right now, and they don't realize they're angry, but they're irritable, and there's no room for error. What we used to be able to get away with, you could come back out and say, whoa, okay, sorry. We meant to do this. Turns out we should have done this. Sorry about that. And everyone goes, oh, okay, well, and we move on. Those days aren't happening right now.
Yeah.
And that's why you see across the United States, you see things like riots to address really legitimate issues regarding racial unrest. But rather than peaceful protests, we're seeing looting because people are irritable and angry.
Yeah.
And not to take anything away from the legitimate issues that they are quite rightfully facing, but there's no counterbalance to that. And if your communication style out there depends on a certain amount of goodwill or give us the benefit of the doubt, that's not happening. It's not going to happen. It's critically important that you handle those moments. Those frontline customer service reps need to be trained on how to deal with angry, upset people. It used to be if you pissed off a season ticket holder or a long-term cell phone contract holder, they get upset and they leave. But now they don't. Now they post the entire transcript of the video on YouTube, and before you know it, it's got 150,000 views. Yeah.
Look, my final part, Jeff, I'm thoroughly enjoying this conversation with you, by the way. My final part is to ask you further about outcomes of good crisis management. I like your expression, fall up. What do you mean by that in real terms?
I'll give you a real story that was in the book. So I get a call one day. It was a specialty aviation company in Africa, and they had an accident, and 2 people were dead. 2 of their customers, paying customers, were dead, and they were in full-on panic mode. So I hop on a plane, and we had issued a holding statement to say to the world media, yes, we are aware, we are truly shocked and horrified. We are rushing to the scene. We will have a full and complete report of the minute we can. We hope to announce something on Saturday at 10 a.m. local time. That gave us all that did was buy us time because we needed to think. Mm-hmm. Turns out, it was my client's fault. There's no denying that. You could blame weather, but the pilot really shouldn't have taken off in the first place. Right. So we hit it, and we hit it hard with empathy. We made a pretty conscious decision to not to focus on the worldwide media stuff. And we reached out directly to the high net worth clients, the contacts, the individuals, the people like the Thomson Holidays, all of those people, and say, we are aware this has happened. We are truly horrified. Here's what we understand, that you probably have questions. We're asking ourselves those very same questions. We are going to report back to you the minute we can give you an honest and legitimate answer. And then we continued to do that for about a month as we understood, hey, here's what we know. Here's what we don't know. Here's what we're still working on. Mm-hmm. But we kept them in the loop, and we did it with as much empathy as we could drive up, because one of my driving principles is that people don't need to agree with me, but they need to know that I know how they feel if they're going to trust me. Mm-hmm. I need them to trust me. And the only way I can do that is with empathy. It's not with honesty. It's not with expertise. They need empathy. They need to know that I know how they feel if they're going to trust me. Yeah. So we hit that hard. Long story short, I ran into the client a couple years later at a tourism and hospitality conference, and I said, "Hey, how's business?" Naturally, I was curious how. And he goes, "Oh, well, we're not where we are." And I go, "Okay, well, that's understandable. I mean, that was a pretty devastating hit to the company. How bad is it?" He goes, "No, I'm sorry, you misunderstood. We're up. We're up by almost a third. They grew their business by 29%."
Wow.
It is not that the bad things happen to you. It's how you respond to the bad things that determine trust and credibility. Yeah. And it was a classic example of, there is something clearly dangerous that has happened here, but here is an opportunity to prove to you, whether you are Thomson Holidays or whether you're Abercrombie and Kent or whether you're the Global Media Alliance, that we can be trusted. And for a lot of different tour operators never even knew that they could take this particular flight experience. A lot of people were curious, but well, that's actually kind of a neat idea,
That's a brilliant story and a brilliant example. Quite straightforward, Jeff, how good you are. The one thing all of us now face in business is the certainty of uncertainty, and crisis will definitely be a big part of that uncertainty. I suggest no matter how good and efficient a leader you are, you will be faced by some crisis or other. I trust my guest today, Jeff Chatterton, the author of Leaders Under Fire, has helped you see why you need to be forearmed to handle such crisis. Thanks, Jeff, for a great interview.
Malcolm, you are a scholar and a gentleman. I have been humbled and truly grateful to just have an opportunity to hang out with you and to connect and to share. Thank you.
Hey, that's great empathy, Jeff. I like it.